What are you excited about now?
Growing this business. I get up every single day. Every single day I get, pumped up coming to work to grow the business. It's exciting. We've got big plans for future growth. So that's what really gets me jazzed up every morning and excited.
Welcome to the Mark Faris Experience, your ultimate guide to business and wealth building. Today we sit down with Paul Walker. Paul is an incredible businessman. You got to check this story out. So Paul found a real niche, a real need in the marketplace, and him and two other partners, they started a company called Grackle Docs. Now, this is no ordinary company. What they do is they really found a niche in the disability market and he's going to be talking all about how he's built the software to really serve this need. And what's really interesting about this story is as soon as Paul made the decision, Paul and his partner made the decision about a year ago, they went from 3 employees to 42 employees in 1 year. So we're going to be diving in today all about that story there and how he was able to do it. Paul, welcome on the show.
Thank you very much. Great to see you.
You too, Paul. I'm really excited to hear this because, we know each other, but I never really got into how you were able to do this, how you were able to go from three team members and just make a decision, say, you know what, we're really going to dial this in and make a big impact. And you scaled it up to 42 within 12 months. So, but before we jump into that period, let's go back to the very beginning. Kind of Sure. Maybe share the origin story and maybe like an early struggle you had to overcome when you found out, and maybe talk as well about how did you figure out that there was such a need in the marketplace for what you're doing?
Yeah, great. So why don't we go back? I'm not sure how far you want to go back. We'll go back a ways just to explain the story because accessibility is still, I think people see it as fairly niche. Having said that, there are disability laws out there. Companies need to comply with various regulations. In the last few years, we've seen the market really change in terms of adoption and companies realizing that it's in their best interest to ensure that all of their content is accessible. But where we got into accessibility, I started my career as a software engineer, so I did a lot of programming, moved into more management positions, and one of the companies that I was at, and I was there for 16 years, we were in e-presentment. So think of your credit card statement. Back in around 2000, it became very big to get all of your statements online. We were an e-presentment company, so we were taking that data that would go to a printer, and we were converting that into other formats so it could be available online, PDF being a predominant one. So we were doing this for a lot of large financial services companies, basically anyone who was generating lots of paper, and they were trying to reduce the paper and get everything online. So one of those companies came to us and said, we have one of our own directors that is suing us because our own statements are not accessible. So a director of the company was blind. He could not get access to the statements from his own company, and he was suing his company to ensure that they made all of their documents accessible. So at the time, we didn't really have any knowledge about what accessibility meant from a PDF. This is 20 years ago. So we started diving into accessibility, how to make a document accessible. And I was on a team of people that were really the first company to ever take high volume statements and make them accessible online. So that's where we learned a lot about accessibility, PDF specifically, which is a big focus of ours. And so that's where accessibility came into play for us.
So Paul, can you maybe just go a little bit deeper there? So when you say accessible, so somebody just within a company, perhaps they don't have visibility, they can't see, they're blind, and they have need to access a document. What is, when you say accessibility, how would they be able to access that? Can you maybe just draw the picture a little bit clearer for listeners?
Definitely. Great question. So there is software out there. It's called screen reader software. And that's what people with visual disabilities, if you're blind and you're using your computer, the screen reader software makes it available to the users so you can navigate your computer, with hotkeys on your computer. You can jump around to, open programs. And then when you get to a website in a browser, you can use keys, and the screen reader will help the user have the content read aloud to them. So it actually read the content on a page to them.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
Makes
it's
sense.
it's
Yeah.
reading it aloud, and I think the key thing though is also the navigation of it,
Hmm.
not just reading it aloud, but allowing the user to move around as a sighted user would and get access to the various documents or website content. So the way that's actually done is you need to embed metadata, whether it's in a website or in a document. It needs to have specific data embedded within it that doesn't change the visual aspects of the document, but makes it so the screen reader can actually utilize
Mm.
the document properly.
Okay. That's great explanation. Thank you. Yeah. Keep going here because I'm
Okay.
excited here. We got.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so that, 20 years ago, we continued on. I was at that company for 16 years. We did a lot of work in accessibility, really in the document side of things. We sort of improved our products over time, made it easier to make content accessible, worked with a lot of financial services. And then part of this story that's you asked me about a challenge, so probably one of the most challenging things that happened. I was at this company for 16 years. That company we found out was going to get acquired, and we found out who the acquiring company was, and we had pretty good knowledge about who that company was and the way that they operated. So many of us had concerns about job security in that process. So 16 years at this company, another company comes in, acquires it. Our fears were founded, and about a week later, they laid off 25% of the company. And then in that process, myself and a lot of the senior leaders left the company. So here I went through 16 years at one company, love the people, get acquired. Now I'm out, thinking, what am I going to do next? So for years, I've moved through different positions, and even though I love programming and I still program some today, what I found is I really enjoyed more like the management side of things,
Mm.
building products, working with teams, building teams. And I, over the years, really felt that I could and wanted to run my own company. But you need an idea, right? What's the idea? And so you also need the idea, but you also need the time. You got to have the courage to go and do it as well. So, in my case, this very challenging situation in terms of, okay, it's 16 years. I'm now looking for a job, and I thought if there's ever going to be a time to start your own company, this is it, right? Because the challenge is, well, at one point it's very challenging. You don't have income. At the same time, it's like, okay, I don't have to worry about losing that income and start my own company. So it was really, I'm not going to say it was fun, but looking back on it now, it was a blessing in disguise that I was given the opportunity to like go and do my own thing for the first time. Maybe if that hadn't happened, maybe I wouldn't have done it. Maybe I wouldn't have
Well,
taken the leap.
and it's like it gives you permission to go after your dream, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And that looking at it that way is such an important thing. And it was probably there was a little bit of a relief, but it was scary at the same time.
Very, yeah,
So just
very
if you're
scary.
listening out there, I just really want to hone in on this moment that Paul's talking about. It was probably really scary for Paul, but
It
he
was
was
very,
like, there was this internal struggle. But that's where if you're going through a challenge right now, and maybe something is like horrible that happened, you know what? If the door closed on you, that gives you permission to go open up any door you want, right? And so I
absolutely.
just really want to like hone in on that. So, okay, so you're feeling, secretly kind of relieved in a way, but also it's a little bit like there's a little bit of fear there. Okay, what am I going to do
For sure.
next? So you're in this moment. Then what? What happened?
So, like I said, you need an idea, right?
Yeah,
So it's great.
yeah.
Now I've got all this free time on my hands to go build something, but what am I going to do? So this is where the accessibility piece kind of joined up with where I was from looking for my own business startup. I was using Google Docs, Google Slides quite extensively. It's basically, I'm not sure if you know, but Google's version of Microsoft Office, right? They have their own, but it was all web-based and it was great for collaboration. So my business partner, he and I founded the company. He and I were using Google Docs and Google Slides a lot for collaboration. We get on a call like this, but you could actually look at a document together. You could look at, a spreadsheet together all online. But based on my accessibility experience, it became very obvious that Google did not have a solution in order to be able to generate accessible content. So Microsoft had actually built within Word or PowerPoint, you can export a PDF, for example. They actually built in their own checker, and then you could export a document in an accessible format in PDF. Google didn't have that. So through my use of Google Docs and Slides and Sheets, but also my accessibility experience, we identified that there was this gap not in specifically within Google, and that's where we started. Our first software product was an add-on for Google Docs and Google Slides and Google Sheets, the three main products. And so we built an add-on that helped users check the documents or a slide for any of these accessibility issues. And then also with our document experience, the knowledge of how to actually make an accessible PDF came into play, because it's one thing to know PDF gets very technical, and the lead developer on our team, the three of us that basically started it, my business partner, he and I founded it, but then our lead developer, he's like a PDF expert. He's been dealing with PDF and working with PDF and accessibility knowledge. So when I pitched him on the idea of what we're doing, is I'm all in. So it's basically three of us that started this company and started our journey into accessibility, with really the focus on Google and accessible content out of Google.
So, okay, there's a couple of things there. So just for the listeners out there, so we use Microsoft for Faris team, the brokerage side. When we launched Faris Capital, we started using Google, and I'll say, like, from we'll just say a usability on a day-to-day, Google is like extremely efficient, and especially when you're sharing and you're doing a lot of collaboration, Google has been wonderful. So I've got to see both worlds in depth, and so Google are definitely wonderful. Now, a couple things, Paul. When you started the business, did you have this big business plan that multiple page business plan before you got started? Was it like a one pager? Did you have kind of an overall strategy, or was it just like, there's a problem in the marketplace, here's this, we have a solution, just start building the solution and we'll figure it out? Like, take us through with the very early stage before you guys, started working. What'd you do?
It was more the latter. It's like, we see this need in the market. We know this is a problem. We know that accessibility is a requirement. We know that laws are coming into place that'll require people to make content accessible. And we just started working. We just started developing, working on product, and we didn't think too much. I mean, at the point where we started pitching to some investors to come join us in some funding, that's when I'd say we started to solidify more of the business plan. But to get started, we basically started building and just moving forward.
Was it like a minimum viable product that you built to be able to prove out, or
exactly.
Did you know? So you built it so that it was enough so tangible so you could go to an investor. Did you know who your end buyer was? Were you building it for Google specifically? Was that?
Well, I guess the biggest part of our plan was eventually Google's going to buy this, right?
Okay,
Google needs to make it. That
well,
hasn't
I'm sure
happened
there's a lot of business owners like, we have this great idea and Google's going to buy it for millions and millions of dollars, but because you were
part of it.
But you actually saw a need. So what? Okay, so maybe just take us around that, and maybe can you elaborate? Like, was it Google? Were there any other potential buyers out there, or is it just you found a need and you really believe that there's such a gap there? Let's just fill this as fast as possible.
That was definitely, we have a gap. Let's fill it as fast as possible with the mindset of at some point this likely makes sense for Google to actually integrate within their own suite instead of having a third-party product. So yeah, we built a minimum viable product. We just kind of went heads down for a few months. We had targeted going to, there's a very large accessibility conference every year in California. So we wanted to be there at that conference. We had started late enough that we couldn't get like a booth there or a speaking slot or anything. So my business partner and I, once we had our minimum viable product, we just showed up at the conference and grabbed anyone who had listened to us, like anyone. We went to other people's booths. We went to the Google booth. We demonstrated. We're sitting in a corner with my laptop open, showing people what's going on, and just kind of got some excitement around it. Now, the following year, we did the full proper, booth and all of that stuff. But to really get started, it was just a lot of grabbing people and saying, "Hey, take a look at this and tell us what you think."
So how'd you guys then transition to getting it in front of investors? And was it more kind of friends and family that was that the early supporters, or did you go into a group? Because there's a lot of business owners that, they have the idea, maybe they built their minimum viable product and they just don't know where to go next. Maybe they don't have kind of a friends and family kind of circle. What did you do?
So to start with, we were totally self-funded. So not only am I at this point of 16 years, no job, let's start something new.
Hey,
But then
honey,
hey,
we're dipping into those savings.
we're dipping in,
Yeah.
which is also quite a funny part of the story because that's where, my wife Shayna, she got into real estate
Yeah.
because I was doing this startup. So she will argue that she was one of the early investors because she was helping fund this, right? Which is true. It's actually very true. So that was part of it, taking our own money. My business partner, he put money in. But then when we got to the point where we knew that we had something, that's when we built out more of our plan and our pitch deck and things like that. And fortunately, through many years of business, I kept in contact with a lot of great people that I've worked with before. A former, the company that I was with for 16 years, the former CEO of that company and one of the board members, we kept in touch and we pitched them on the idea and they said, yeah, like sign us up, we'll come in and help get you guys started. So they put the initial funding in. And since then, fortunately, we haven't needed much in the way of additional funding. We've been able to sustain from that point.
So just a couple of things there. You're starting a business. It goes without saying that if you can have your spouse support you, like in this case, Shayna supported Paul, and she was the first investor, so to speak. But
yeah.
she got into real estate to help support. That's huge. I mean, it is such a blessing. I know, like, if I didn't have Joanna supporting me on the businesses, it would be a real challenge. So the first person, the first investor, I think that's a very valid point. You need to sell your spouse. If you can get them on board, it will help you through the darkest moments. I'll just say that right now. It is such an important thing anytime you start a business. And then the other thing that I noticed there, Paul, so you ended up, it's not like you were going to investors outside of the industry. You looked internally to say, okay, what potential investor would understand what we're doing here and understand the differentiation and how unique or maybe uncommon your offering really was, enough where they would say, okay, that is something special. And you have, we'll just say that you have a reputation and credibility as well with them, which gives a higher likelihood of them coming in and investing.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think that's something that I've learned over the years is, keeping those relationships strong with people that you've worked with or worked for, because in the future, you want to be able to rely on those people. You want to be able to go to people that you've built the trust and credibility with and trust that you have an idea that has legs and they trust you to execute on it.
Yeah. No, that's great. And tell us, what was in that business plan? So when you went to those investors, there's entrepreneurs out there that really wouldn't, how do you even put together a slide deck or investor deck? What would you have in that when you ended up pitching that?
Yeah, I think the key parts are always like to understand the market opportunity, like what is the market? Why is this unique? How are you going to capture some of that market share? Because people have lots of ideas. Working with developers for years, there's lots of developers that have great ideas that I don't think will ever make any money, right? So it's like you have to have an idea that you know there's a market opportunity that you can fill. That you're not just going to build technology for technology's sake. So I think the key thing is understanding your market, knowing why you're going to build something, why you exist, who you're going to sell to, like who is the buyer. Um, and then just like every startup, we had the typical, here's our hockey stick graph, right? We're going to generate all sorts of revenue that's going to take off, but based on real numbers. And what's interesting is Google was very, very predominant in education. So one of those at that first accessibility conference, when we were pulling people and saying, hey, take a look at this, there's a lot of people in education that said, Google's huge in education, right? Students love it, students use it. So there's a big gap there. So we really focused on education and what that market looks like. So yeah, understanding the buyers, what's your plan? So we looked at things like how many educational institutes are there in North America? And then you just kind of break down the math and we say if we could get, 10% of, all school boards and school districts that utilize Google adopting them, we have a viable business, right? So we just kind of worked out the numbers. Early days, it's always a bit of speculation, and
Yeah.
so there is that you're never quite sure, but we went through that process of figuring out what would it take to actually turn this into a business.
And what do you think was the uncommon advantage that you guys would have that maybe Google, like, why didn't Google just do it up until that point? Did they just not see it? And what would maybe differentiate you compared to the others companies out there that are maybe doing the same thing?
Yeah, well, to date, we have new products and services now, but to date, we're the only company that really has an accessibility solution for Google. When we pitched things to Google and showed them, they're all like, okay, that's nice. Google actually refers people to us
Oh,
as opposed,
really?
yeah. So if they have people talk to them and say, we need to make this content accessible, first thing they say is go talk to Grackle Docs. So yeah, we're a little surprised that they weren't more interested. Another funny story was at the next accessibility conference the following year, the people that were most interested in what we were doing was Microsoft. So we had Microsoft people coming to our booth wanting demos. What are you guys doing? Because they were actually looking at rewriting their own accessibility checker and content. So they really liked what we were doing. We actually built a proof of concept for Microsoft, and we're going to work with them on building a new version of Grackle for Microsoft. But they decided to take it all in-house and do it themselves. It is interesting that Google, I think when you look at the history of Google, though, they do a lot of that, they do a lot of acquisitions, companies they acquire, and they're quite happy to let other development companies, developers build things and then just refer it. So, but we'll see where it goes. Maybe Google will eventually want to pick it up.
Okay, so this sets the stage extremely well. So I want to talk about this moment that you were doing this for a while, and then all of a sudden, pretty much a year ago, Paul, you said you made a decision and said we're going to go all in on this now.
Yeah.
And within 12 months, you go from 3 employees to 42.
So this is a
this
is a
this to
really
me is
interesting.
like it's the power in making a decision and going all in on one idea. But can you take us to that moment of and like why what were the maybe what was the setup to be able to be making that decision, and then take us through what happened next after you decided.
So it was probably actually more like 2 years ago. My business partner and I, we both left our previous roles at companies because we were kind of doing this. At some points, we were full time. Like I had a CTO role at a company and doing this on the side. And 2 years ago, we had grown to the point where we saw that the business could be viable and pay our salaries and
And
everything
how
on
long
its
were you
own.
in it at that point doing the business?
So that would be 5 years.
5 years. Okay. So you're 5 years
Five
in, you
years.
have three full-time people, and it's you and
Yep,
one other partner now, or do you?
that's
Yeah.
right.
Okay.
Still really three of us, but my business partner, he and I decided that we were going to leave those jobs and do consulting for another accessibility company. So we were still with the goal that we would eventually make Grackle Docs the full-time gig. So we were doing consulting, and through that process, doing a lot of consulting work, the company that we're doing consulting work for was in a position that we saw an opportunity. So they were doing a lot of services related to PDF accessibility, big services business. They had an audit team that would audit websites and look at content. And there was a moment where we had the opportunity to acquire the company. So we decided to go all in and make an acquisition. So we went from 3 employees to probably about 35 once the acquisition was finalized in about a week, which was pretty hectic. And then after that, we've continued to grow beyond that. And I think we're up to 42 people now. So interestingly, as part of that process, the same original investors that invested in Grackle Docs, we put, again, kind of pooled our own money, went back to them, provided some more capital in the form of a loan to go and do this acquisition. So we're jumping kind of both feet in with an acquisition that's worked out great.
Okay. So you see a company, see an opportunity, and this is such a great conversation to have and to really look at. Is you can grow by different ways. You can grow organically, right, from scratch, or you can grow by acquisition. And so what was it about this company, Paul, that you saw to say, you know what, yeah, this acquisition is right up our alley? Like what was it about them that said, yeah, we're gonna take this risk? And then how did you protect was there anything you did to protect your downside with that acquisition as well that our listeners can learn from?
Yeah, I think we're in the same space, right? So it's an accessibility company, but there was no overlap in the business at all. What they were focused on and what we were doing, they had a very large customer base doing document remediation, everything from companies that would send them 2 documents and say, can you make this accessible, to large financial services that would send them hundreds of documents every month to be made accessible, to put on their website, for example. So being there and working as consultants for a year really helped because we knew their business and we knew what they were doing. So that gave us more of the assurance that we could make it successful as opposed to being completely on the outside looking in. And in terms of the downside, there really wasn't a lot of protection that we had at that point. Basically, we're in a position where we knew we were putting money in, and with the hope that after the acquisition, your concern is always, will customers stay on board, and will the acquisition go smooth, and will you keep the people on board? And so there was risk from that perspective, but I think it was greatly mitigated just based on the fact that we knew the people, we knew the staff, and we knew the business.
That's great. So the existing people that you took over, so what were some of the first things you did to say retain those staff? Because when the company bought you guys back many years ago, there's just a lot of the senior leaders ended up leaving. Obviously, culture wasn't something that they were a strong suit in. Were there any tangible activities that you did saying, we experienced this many years ago, a takeover that was not successful. Here are some things that we're going to do with this takeover that is going to be different, so that the existing team and the talent that's there, which is probably a good size of the acquisition value, would probably be in some of the talent as well, I would think.
Absolutely.
Right?
Totally.
So what tangible things did you guys do with that takeover to mitigate them leaving?
Yeah, I think a lot of communication, just over communicate, right? Talking to the senior leadership was important because there were people there that we needed to retain. They had customer relationships. It was really important for us to make sure that they were happy and stayed on board. the staff that was doing a lot of the remediation work. So we worked really hard at just communicating a lot and being really transparent, I feel, about what we were doing, right? Almost to the point of being a little uncomfortable with the level of transparency. But I think that went a long way, especially with more of the management team, to build trust in us that, we're giving them details of what we're doing as a business that we likely didn't have to. But I think they saw that as by being really transparent and honest, it built a lot of trust. And then, they jumped on board and were critical to the success of us getting where we are right now.
So just a few things that we learned with any sort of change management. If you're looking at doing something like, say, an acquisition, that's potential one, or maybe it's just a big decision that you're doing within your company. What I found was if you relay these four things is why the change is being made, what is going to be changed, how is it going to affect them, and then what's in it for them. If you can actually communicate in that way, and I think, Paul, you nailed it, like over communication is like powerful, and just transparency and just letting them know you're a real person and that, listen, we're not perfect either. But one thing, that I will commit is that if something does come up, our door's open and, here's our line. I think if you do that, people really respect that. If you can really see it from their point of view. So I really love that over communication. That I've heard that before with takeovers. That's a really big part of success. Okay. So is there I say from a leadership standpoint, is there anything that you've applied to really help that company now that you're going from a smaller company to overseeing? You're basically your senior leader now. You're running a whole enterprise, right? And so is there anything that's changed on your day-to-day management as a leader, that how your position has changed and how you're able to make maybe different kind of impact now overseeing more people?
Yeah, it's interesting because as a three-person company, you wear many hats. And it's not that I'm not wearing many hats still, because even at the size that we are, it's still relatively small. So I think the big change that we're going through right now is during acquisition, it's like all hands on deck. Everything, my business partner and I, like we were working crazy hours trying to make sure everything was done well, that the acquisition was successful. We're at the point now where we can kind of take a step back, and we're doing additional hiring, which is great. So, like I said, I was still doing some programming at times. Now, what I'm trying to do is really work on the business and not be so in the day-to-day, in the weeds of everything going on with the development team. And so I think that's what we're in the process of changing, is where we can actually spend more time focused on, future opportunities. Are there future acquisitions we might want to do? Is there new products that we want to build, which we started to do as well, as build some new product? So really thinking about how we grow and scale the business. So getting the right people in positions where we don't have to be worried about all the day-to-day, that's been huge. And we're getting there now. I wouldn't say that we're quite where we want to be, but that's just part of the process.
Yeah.
Probably in that process, one of the first, probably the first significant hire we made after the acquisition was for a VP of finance. And I think people would probably wonder, because a lot of startups, they don't care about anything except building new product, right? Just sales, sales, sales. And so the two areas we did do that, we hired salespeople. We've got one of the people that came on board, our VP of sales was fantastic. So he's building out a team. We hired a VP of finance, and that's been a godsend. Like, just to have somebody that really, I was pretending to be an accountant when I wasn't. So hiring a VP of finance.
How'd you find them? Accountant, did you hire a headhunter? Did you actually go to the market like with regular job posting? How'd you find a talent like that?
We went to recruiters, we went to headhunters. There are some really good headhunters out there, but they all obviously cost money as well, right? There's a cost with that. We decided that we were going to first try just posting on LinkedIn. So we posted a position on LinkedIn. We probably had I can't remember the exact number, but 200 applications over the weekend. We posted on a Friday, and over the weekend, we had to actually close it down because we had so many. What's interesting is the very first person that applied to the position is the person that we ended up hiring, which is very rare. To the very first person, we interviewed several people, but it just turned out the first person that applied, the first person that we interviewed, and then we ended up hiring that person.
So just for the listeners out there, if you hire a headhunter, and we've hired them a number of times, generally it's in around 25% of the overall comp, and you can kind of negotiate here and there depending on who it is that you're hiring. But there's definitely a time and a place, definitely for senior leaders. It's really great because a lot of these seniors, they have existing jobs that they're in, so they'll actually go hunt for you. Which can be really powerful. But in this case here, you posted and they were attracted. So your job posting must have been written really well, Paul, because you attracted that right person.
I didn't write the job posting, so I will give credit to my business partner for that one. He posted it, so but it was well
Smart
done.
Guy. So are you more the visionary or the integrator operator side from a partnership? Who would be more of a visionary between the two of you?
It's interesting because we complement each other very well. I think we bring very different skills to the table. My business partner, he ran sales teams for years, so he's a great sales guy, ran sales teams. If you were to look at us, you would probably divide us a little bit, sales and marketing on one side, and I would tend to be more product technical engineering, but we cross over a lot. So we talk to customers. But I'd say as a general split, that's probably true. The two of us, we try to spend a lot of time talking to customers because that's where you get the ideas from. We still go to the trade shows ourselves, stand on the booth, talk to people. I think that's important. So I think between the two of us, we kind of share vision. When it comes to building and executing on product, that's where my responsibility is. When it comes to hitting sales targets and things, that's more where my business partner's side of things is. But we pretty much collaborate on everything.
Yeah, that's really important. You get clear on, there's generally going into partnerships, there's strengths that each have, and it's good. In this case here, you're building off of each other. One thing that you said that I really want to underline is, you notice how Paul went from 3 employees to, he's got 42 employees, and he's still going and speaking at the front lines. Like he's listening to what the clients are actually, end users are actually saying, and that feedback. This is something that the larger you grow, the easier it'll be to insulate you and lock yourself in the office and not hear the truth.
Definitely.
Because by the time the information gets to you, it's filtered and watered down. And so if you go and actually speak, so like, for example, we just closed on 104 units in Tampa. And so we actually did a launch, a resident launch grant. And so for all of our tenants, we call them residents, we actually did, like, basically it was a kickoff orientation that, there's a new sheriff in town. There's a new community now. And we gave away backpacks, free, 1 month free rent, and got a food truck and whatnot. And when I was there, I spoke to as many residents as I could during that time frame. And it was amazing, all the information that I got from just speaking with the residents, all the feedback. They're telling me about how the community next door were treating them, so poorly. And this is amazing what you guys have been doing since you guys have come over. But that's the real truth. So there's 2 parts to this. There's who your end user is, and then who your frontline staff are as well. And I find if you can keep those conversations up, but then have like a regular cadence for meeting and collecting that feedback. So for us, it's a weekly meet that we'll collect it and we'll compile it to all the senior leaders, and then we'll actually have a conversation. Whether it's weekly or biweekly or even once a month, that is something there that you're going to hear the truth, and that's what you definitely need, especially as you start to grow and scale. So, Paul, it sounds like you're doing that still. I mean, I think that speaks volumes for leaders and companies that are hunting for that still, right?
Yeah. And I think especially in where my role could be the type of role where I just lock down in the office every day and focus on the technology and the products and all of that. But you really get the truth when you talk to customers. Like, what are your real problems? How can we help you solve those problems? And actually, it's a lot of fun, right? Going to talk to people and understand what their day-to-day challenges are and figure out what we can do to help them.
Is there anything since you've made the acquisition? I mean, it sounds really sexy, Paul, right? You make a multi-million dollar acquisition, you buy a company and you go from, 3 to 42 employees. It sounds great. Is there anything that was maybe different, whether it was like good or maybe more challenging than you had thought, that now that you've made that acquisition, you're on the other side of the water, so to speak?
Yeah, fortunately, this acquisition went really well.
Okay.
When I think back to it, the biggest challenge was really just the time commitment, right? You literally go from 3 people. We're in the process of changing payroll companies and benefits packages and all of that. So the first 2 months, I would say, and were really, I'd say stressful, but more just from a time commitment. There were just so many things that had to get done. During that process, we were talking to customers every day, especially the big ones, right? Reassuring them that things are going to go well under Grackle Docs, no major changes in terms of the people. And so there were just lots and lots of conversations. My business partner's based out of the UK, so he was doing a lot of midnight calls, his time to talk to me. So there was time zone challenges. But overall, I think putting that effort in was key. Like I said before, the communication, both with staff, internal, external with customers, that paid off. I think that was the key to a really successful transition.
Yeah, that's such great insight. And it's so recent as well. I know that listeners are getting a lot of value just by listening to this, because it's like, well, why not talk to somebody that's already been down the road? They've come back now and they're telling you some of the things to do to make sure that it's successful. That's really powerful. What advice would you give a new business owner? Say, there's an entrepreneur, they have an idea, and they're a little bit scared, but they're thinking about taking action. What advice would you give that entrepreneur that's listening today?
Ask for help. I think that's it. I think a lot of entrepreneurs feel that they have to do everything themselves. There's people out there that have, like you said, a lot of experience. Reach out to people that have been through it. I think get feedback on your idea from trusted people, because you can also get feedback. In the early days, it was easy. We're at a conference and somebody comes up to the booth and says, "What I really need you to do is add these 3 things." And so here's my feedback. And I said, "Okay, if we did that, would you buy?" Well, no. It's okay. So those features aren't really needed, right? So I think feedback, you got to be careful that you don't just jump on every piece of feedback as well, because it's not always the best. But I think don't try and do it alone. I was really fortunate because I was working with someone that I'd worked with for 25 years. I was working with investors that I'd worked with for years. So I was really fortunate in that regard. But don't feel that you've got to solve every single problem. Surround yourself with the best people that you can and rely on their strengths. Don't think that you have to be like me and try to be an accountant when I'm not, right? You might have to do that for a little bit, but the best you can get around you and surround yourself with will make it a lot easier.
Such great counsel, Paul. What was that question that you said when somebody gives you feedback and you ask that question back? I just want to highlight that question because there's such an important point to that. Can you share that question that you asked?
Yeah. So they came up with a few features. If you had these, I think there were 2 or 3 features, things that they said, if you had these in, this is what I need in the product. And I said, great. If we add those, will you buy? And then there's that pause. It's like, no. He's like, so then if this feature isn't going to be something that actually, causes someone to buy, is it really necessary? So then we moved on and we didn't implement that. But I've had the other side too, right? Where people have said, this is the thing that's missing and we will buy if you add this. So being really responsive to customers, and those ones that said they would usually did. So we had a couple where they didn't, but usually the people said we will buy did.
That's such a great question to monetize that and to ask them point blank, and the truth will come out, because that's such a valid point, Paul, that collecting feedback, not all feedback is created equal. And so as a leader, you need to have discernment of what is the most important thing that is going to actually make an impact in your business, because chasing 100 different rabbits, it'll pull you nowhere very quick. It'll spread you thin. Right. And so I think that question is such a powerful point. There is this story of the CEO that was going out and he was speaking with frontline customers, and there was a call center. They were charging people by the phone call. So they were booking appointments. They were actually taking calls, and they were answering calls on behalf of the company. So they were a call center. And they were going out and speaking with all these customers. And one of the customers said, you know what, if you were paying, you say $1 a call right now, if you actually took and booked appointments for me, so I didn't need to figure out the whole appointment, I would pay you $10 per appointment. And so that was real feedback that he got that idea. And then he ended up creating his company all around booking appointments versus just being a call center and taking calls. Right. And so that's the kind of discernment that you need when you're getting feedback, and knowing what to implement, what not to, what is going to be dollar generate, like what's going to be what's going to help you with the pointy end of the stick, which is revenue. What's going to help me bring in more revenue? And that discernment to be able to keep your team focused on preserving the core, stimulating progress, right? And so I think that's such a power. I want to make sure that the listeners really get this, because we hear it all the time about collecting feedback. Make sure you collect feedback, but you got to know what is the most important. So I would just have discernment there. Yeah.
And revenue is always a great way to test it.
Yeah. Yeah.
If people are willing to put money down, then it's probably a legitimate idea.
Yeah. Smart question there, Paul. Thanks for sharing that. All right. So entrepreneurs, okay. So they start making money. Okay. They've been investing in their business and they have excess funds. Now they have money sitting there in their account, and, what advice would you have for that entrepreneur? Because they hear, there's billions of dollars saying, go speak to this person, go financial advisor, go do it in stocks, mutual funds. Like, what advice would you give to that entrepreneur that's really figuring out what to do with those excess funds and invest?
Well, if you're an entrepreneur that gets to the point where you have excess funds, that's amazing all on its own. So if you've gotten to that part, congratulations. But then, I think there's two parts. I try to separate it between the business side and the personal side. So the primary reason to generate free cash flow on the business side is to reinvest in the business. So it's to continue to grow the business. So when you're starting to see free cash flow, the temptation can be, that's great, especially after you've worked for years without a lot of income and you finally see that. And the temptation is to pull as much of that back out as you can. And I totally understand that temptation. But I think find the balance. If you have that free cash flow, reinvest as much as you can into the business while taking care of yourself, right? Because ultimately you still have to live, you have families. So it's important that you don't just put everything into the business, but it's also important that you don't suck everything out of the business, because, if just because you're successful today doesn't mean you'll be successful a year from now. If you're not innovating and you're not growing, then that gives the potential for someone else to come in and get a foothold in your business. So take the excess cash. So that's why I split it: business, reinvest in the business. But what you actually have in the way of now as an entrepreneur, that you're finally making some money, then you need to take that money and figure out, where can I invest this personally? Obviously, you've got two big investments. One is your business, might turn out to be the biggest investment you ever have in your life, right? That might be the big exit, the big payday. But at the same time, taking care of the home investments and making sure that you're putting money into things that will set you up for future success there. I don't have a magic formula for it, but I think it's important that you do both, right? That you're building that business, because ultimately for most businesses, that's the end goal is what's your exit strategy? What do you plan on doing with it? So you need to build that. But at the same time, don't put all of your eggs in that
Got
and
it.
make sure you're taking some money out to do your own things as well.
So would that be on the personal side? You said home. Is that towards the real estate side? Or is it kind of stocks, mutual funds? Like where have you seen success in the past?
A little bit of both. I think longer term, you can never go wrong with real estate. I'm probably preaching to the choir here, right? But I think is you can never go wrong with real estate long term. So it really depends on what stage you are in your career as well. Like if you're 3 years away from, retirement, the decisions you might make will be different than if you're 20 years away from retirement, which is probably fair. You should be making different. But I think real estate ultimately for me is the long term. If you got lots of time, real estate will always pay off. I think a mix of, stocks and some mutual funds and things like that are still good. But ultimately, I think the real estate is the best approach.
Right on. What are you excited about now?
Growing this business. I'm like, I get up every
I can
single
feel
day.
it, Paul. I can feel the excitement.
Every single day I get, pumped up coming to work
Yeah.
to grow the business. It's exciting. We've got big plans for future growth. So that's what really gets me jazzed up every morning and excited. I think on the technology side, I'm equally parts terrified and excited about AI and right? Because and we've actually got some projects underway in the machine learning AI space as it relates to accessibility. So I'm super excited about that because I think done well and utilized well, it's a technology that can make the lives better, for people with disabilities. And I think it has the potential to really change the game in the accessibility space. So from a technology perspective, super excited about that. Just growing the business is what gets me going every day.
You're born for this, Paul. I can see, from a leader standpoint there, I think if the leader is excited about what they're doing, I think that's infectious for the rest of the company, right? And so that's probably a big transition. They probably felt an injection of energy with that transition of you guys taking over. Generally with an acquisition, that new, sometimes in the case when, I guess when you guys were acquired back in the day, it was just maybe a different approach, different culture. But when you have somebody like super passionate and engaged and they're coming into the business, it's just like, team members, they flourish and you'll get more out of them as well if you can get them excited.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Cool. All right. So you ready for the rapid fire part of the talk here, Paul?
Sure.
Cool.
Let's go.
All right. So first question is, which book has had the biggest impact on your business or wealth creation?
So there's two books. Can I do
you
two?
got two. We'll allow two. Yeah.
Probably one of the most impactful books is a book called Drive. The author's name is Daniel Pink, and it talks about like the true intrinsic, what motivates people intrinsically. And this whole carrot and stick concept just simply doesn't work. So he talks about autonomy, mastery, and purpose. And it really spoke to me, especially in previous roles where I didn't feel that I had a lot of autonomy. I didn't understand the business or what my purpose was in the business. So that to me was a huge book. Reading that, it really resonated with me that people generally, they want to be able to, if a leader can say, here's my vision of where we're trying to go and paints that picture, people will jump on board. And then if you give them the autonomy, so I'm not big into, even though I'm tempted, I try not to be into the technical weeds of this is how I want you to program something. It's more about this is the end result and give people the autonomy to do it how they wish. Because to me, it's really about the end result, not the how. And people want to master things, so they want to be good at something. So I'm continually trying to learn new skills, and so that was a huge book for me. The other one is called The Obstacle is the Way, and that was a book about how understanding that when an obstacle is put in your way, it might actually be the thing you need to have the success. So you're in business, there's always going to be obstacles. There's going to be challenges, problems, but to come out, and I haven't always done this well myself, so I could say like you get these obstacles and challenges and did I handle them perfectly? Probably not. But getting that understanding that if there's an obstacle there, it's like, how can I use that in a way that will improve my business, improve my life? So those are probably two of the biggest books that really had a profound impact on me as I look at both personally and in business.
Yeah, Drive. That was super powerful book. And
Yeah,
this one obstacle is the way. I'm gonna have to pick that up. Thanks for
yeah,
sharing. That's great.
it's great.
All right. In 3 words, how would others describe you?
Driven, um, analytical, and I hope caring, because I think it's really even though I am very driven about business, and we're all in this in some way to take care of ourselves financially, but at the same time, I truly care about the people, I care about the company, I care about our customers. So I try to take that approach with everything. So hopefully that would be something that people would say.
Well, I think you nailed all 3 there. I see that. I see that in all 3 there. Analytical and driven and caring. Those are 3 powerful combos for a
Yeah.
leader of a company. And last question is, what advice would you give your younger self if you were to give any last parting advice here?
Anything that you want to do, start early. It doesn't matter what it is, right? Because, I guess for me, I had to get to a certain point to start my own company. Things needed to fall in line. Even that challenge or that obstacle may have been the thing that, put me on the right path. But I think doing something early, action is always better than inaction. I see a lot of people that think about things for a long time, and the best way to learn something is to do. Because if you do something, there are very few decisions you can make in business that are going to be like, this could ruin my business if it doesn't turn out well. But if you do something, usually the worst thing that's going to happen is you learn something, which is actually the best thing, right? So I think action over, inaction. You can come up with the best plans. And like your question around the business plan, we didn't spend, months trying to come up with the perfect pitch deck. We probably had 4 or 5 slides in a deck. Here's the basics of the plan, because we would rather just go do something, like go to this accessibility conference and just grab people and say, hey, look at this on my computer. So doing something as opposed to, just thinking about things, you're going to learn stuff by doing that.
Yeah. Take action, start early.
Yeah.
Super powerful advice for anybody looking to get their business off the ground and keep it going as well. Paul, this was super informative. I love the story. There was so many great nuggets in this. Really appreciate you coming on the show here.
Thank you very much. Love being here. Really appreciate the opportunity.
Awesome. All right, guys. Well, thanks for tuning in to the Mark Faris Experience. Hope you found today's conversation super inspiring and insightful. If you enjoyed the episode, don't forget to subscribe and share with others who might benefit from the shared nuggets today. So until next time, I'm Mark Faris, and this has been the Mark Faris Experience.